This question relates to the property tax exemption for homes afflicted by pyrite. As you know, Minister, we had to fight to get an exemption at all. We had to fight for 2 years after 2013 to get that exemption improved, because originally you'd have to spend thousands to do tests to get an exemption of hundreds. The amendment in 2015 is not fit for purpose, and I'm wondering what are you doing to review that scenario and allow homeowners with pyrite avail of a property tax exemption.
Thank you. No, wait a minute now. I'll let you in a few minutes, very briefly. Minister, you can make a reply, and then I'll let you in once Deputy Daly comes back.
I'd like to thank the Deputy for her question. She has campaigned on this long and hard, and I have moved quite a distance to accommodate the concerns she has brought to my attention. The local property tax exemption is intended to apply to those properties that have a significant level of pyrite damage. While this means that not all properties that are affected by pyrite are eligible for the exemption, it is accepted that the presence of pyrite, whether it has already caused structural damage to a property or has the potential to cause such damage, will have a negative effect on the market value of the property. If the property was affected with pyrite on the valuation date, then that can be reflected in the selected valuation band. If a property owner feels that the valuation band selected on valuation date of the 1st of May 2013 did not take account of the existence of pyrite, then he or she should make contact with the Revenue to discuss the possibility of reducing the band. The Deputy will be aware that the qualifying criteria in respect of exemption from LPT for properties with significant pyrite damage were modified by the Finance Local Property Act Amendment Act 2015, which was signed into law on the 20th of December 2015. The Act modified the qualifying criteria to include properties where a certificate of damage has been completed by a competent person, as set down in the relevant regulations, or the property has been accepted into the Pyrite Remediation Scheme operated by the Pyrite Resolution Board, or an insurance company has remediated the property or provided sufficient funds to carry out the remediation, or the person who built the property has remediated it or provided sufficient funds to carry out the remediation. The relaxation of the certification requirement was one of the recommendations made by Dr Don Thornhill in his review of the operation of the local property tax on behalf of the Government in 2015. The changes are significant in that where a property has been included in the Pyrite Remediation Scheme by the Pyrite Resolution Board without testing, or a property has been remediated by a guarantee company or by a builder or developer, or where a party is compensated in lieu of remediation without testing. Revenue will now allow confirmation of remediation or compensation for either the PRB or the relevant party for the purposes of exemption without testing or an NSAI certification.
The Minister has addressed the area where the scheme works to give people pyrite exemptions, but you haven't addressed the question, which was what are you going to do to improve the areas where the exemption cannot be gained, even though the homeowner has pyrite? And your answer seemed to suggest that people could more or less put up a value of nil themselves and that would be accepted. That is not accepted by Revenue, and the terms of the exemption are that a property must have a damage condition rating of 2 or 1 with progression, which means that homeowners with pyrite with a damage condition rating of 1 and clearly with pyrite are not gaining an exemption from the property tax. And we have a ridiculous scenario actually which has experienced in areas where homeowners who have suffered with the house with pyrite go on to sell that house in perfect condition, and the people who purchased the house get a property tax exemption for a perfect house, but the people who lived in that house with pyrite didn't get the exemption for those years. So there are huge problems with it, and what I asked you was, what are you going to do to address those people who are not captured at the moment in the exemption, even though clearly their properties are valueless? And why do you have a ceiling on it? Why is it only limited to 6 years or 8 years? If somebody can't be certified or remediated, their house is valueless, they have to get it.
Introduced further legislation to change the legislative parameters that are there now. But I think progress can be made administratively. And as I said in my reply to Deputy Daly, if a property owner feels that the valuation band selected on the valuation date of the 1st of May 2013 did not take account of the existence of Pyrite, then he or she should make contact with the Revenue to discuss the possibility of reducing the band. In other words, if the house is worth a lot less than was thought in 2013, well then there's an opportunity with the Agreement of Revenue to declare a new valuation at a very low level and consequently meet the terms of the question here. The LPT liability would be significantly reduced, if not eliminated completely.
Thank you very much. Final minute, Deputy.
Minister is saying, I suppose the reason why I'm sort of blinking a bit is that that hasn't been the experience of people when they've gone to Revenue and made that argument. And it is a self-assessment tax, so you would think if it's a property which you are not permitted to sell because it has Pyrite, that the value would be nil and therefore there would be no liability. Now that's basically what the Minister is telling us here. So, I mean, obviously we'll be quoting that back to Revenue and hopefully they won't dispute your words, because if that was the interpretation that was brought in, then many homeowners which have now been told by Revenue to pay up, and indeed that got money forcibly deducted, wouldn't be in that scenario. So I hope that when we quote your words, Revenue will implement it, but I don't see why, given that there is a lack of clarity there, that maybe it might be best if you could instruct them and send them out a notice reminding of their obligations in that regard, so any confusion, which undoubtedly does exist, could be avoided.
And if there is an administrative roadblock preventing what I expect to occur occurring, I'll speak to the Chairman of the Revenue Commissioners and I'll see, is there something that we don't know about which can be remediated on an administrative level.